All right, ready to dive into something pretty cool with me.
Let's do it.
Today, we're talking about the countries with the largest inland water areas. So we're thinking lakes, rivers, reservoirs, all those freshwater spots.
You know, you might think this list is all about massive countries, right?
That's what I thought, too.
But get ready. We're going to uncover some real surprises.
Oh, I love surprises.
We've got a fascinating article from 10 Most To. Today, it breaks down the top 10.
Ooh, top 10 lists are the best.
Packed with cool facts and beautiful imagery.
So, we're going to learn stuff, A and D, see some amazing places.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm sold. Let's jump in.
What's really intriguing about this is that it challenges our assumptions. It's not just about how big a country is overall.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But the proportion of its area that's dedicated to inland water.
I see. So, a tiny country could have a ton of lakes and rivers.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. You start to see the interplay of geography, climate, and even geology.
Okay, so let's start with the big guys.
Right.
I'm guessing the top 3 are the usual suspects, right?
Yeah.
Canada, Russia, and the United States.
Big countries, big water.
But even with those, I bet there are some things that are kind of surprising.
Absolutely.
Okay, like what?
We'll take Canada.
Okay, Canada, our neighbor to the north.
Second largest country in the world.
Huge.
But it actually has the most inland water.
Whoa, really? More than Russia?
Yep. A big part of that is because of the Great Lakes.
Right, the Great Lakes.
Which it shares with the U.S., of course.
Of course, yeah.
Those massive freshwater lakes, they really tip the scales.
And when you think about the Great Lakes, you can't not think about Niagara Falls.
Exactly.
Talk about a reminder of just how much water we're dealing with.
And it really shows how much of an impact these water bodies have, not just on, the landscape, but on the surrounding economies and cultures, too.
So, shipping routes, tourism, all that.
All of that. Even hydroelectric power. Think about the power generated by those falls.
Right. It makes you think about it differently,
It does.
Inland water, it's not just, pretty scenery. It's this, powerful force.
Powerful force shaping whole regions.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. What about Russia? It's massive, right?
It's huge. But it only has about 4% of its territory covered by water.
Huh. Only 4%.
But because it's so big,
That's still a lot of water.
enough for second place.
Wow. And I bet that 4% includes some real gems, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like what?
Like Lake Baikal.
Lake Baikal, yeah.
The deepest lake in the world.
It's almost an inland sea, isn't it?
It is. And what's amazing about Lake Baikal, it's not just the depth.
What else?
The biodiversity. It's home to thousands of unique species.
No way.
A lot of them you won't find anywhere else on Earth.
That makes me think, is there a connection between inland water and biodiversity in a country?
It's definitely a factor. Inland water creates all sorts of different habitats, supports all kinds of species, and they act like corridors for wildlife to move around.
Right. It makes sense.
So yeah, there's a strong connection. But it's not just about, how MUCH water.
What else,
It's also about the quality of the water, how connected those water bodies are, and how healthy the ecosystem is as a whole.
So it's complicated.
It is.
Okay, before we move on, I gotta ask about the U.S. We've got iconic rivers, the Great Lakes. Where do we land?
Well, sharing the Great Lakes with Canada definitely helps us get to third place.
Right.
But it is interesting,
What's that?
Despite the U.S. being pretty big,
Yeah.
we actually have a lower percentage of inland water than some other countries we'll be talking about.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so size isn't everything. I'm ready for some of those unexpected contenders you mentioned.
Let's start with India.
India, okay.
7th largest country in the world.
Huge.
But it comes in at number 4 for inland water.
Whoa, really?
Almost 10% of its total area.
That's a lot more than I would guessed. What is it? Mostly lakes? Rivers?
It's a mix. They've got a huge river system, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra. Those are lifelines for millions of people.
Yeah, I've seen pictures. They're incredible.
And then there are tons of lakes, some natural, some man-made. They're all over the place.
Like what?
Take Hebel Lake in Karnataka, for example. It's this peaceful spot in the middle of a bustling city. Shows you how those water bodies become part of life, even in cities.
That's cool. It's kind of easy to forget about, the importance of just a regular lake in a city.
Totally. And that actually leads us to another interesting one, China.
China. Okay, now that one's surprising.
It is.
I mean, it's the 3rd largest country in the world.
You would think so, right?
But they have a pretty low percentage of inland water.
Only about 1.41%.
Whoa, seriously? I mean, they have the Yangtze River.
That's true. The Yangtze is huge.
And it's one of the longest rivers in the world.
It is. And it's super important for transportation, agriculture, hydroelectric power, all of it.
So even a massive river doesn't mean you're automatically at the top of the list.
Nope.
Makes you think. It's about how the water is spread out, not just how much there is.
You got it. And it also shows how important it is for humans to manage water well.
This is already making me rethink my whole idea of what makes a country water-rich. I bet there are even more surprises coming. What else have you got?
Let's talk about Iran.
Iran. Okay, this one I'm really not expecting.
It's a good one. Iran isn't even in the top 10 biggest countries.
Really?
But it has over 7% water coverage.
Whoa, 7%? That's impressive.
It is.
But I don't think of Iran as having big lakes or rivers.
It's all because of the Caspian Sea.
Oh, the Caspian Sea, right.
And here's the thing. The Caspian Sea is the biggest lake in the world.
Seriously, I always thought it was a sea.
It's so big people get confused, but technically, it's a landlocked saltwater lake.
So Iran's, water superpower status is all because of this massive lake that's practically a sea. That's wild.
It is. And it makes you think, how do they manage such a resource? Especially when it's saltwater, not fresh water.
That's a great point.
It's not just about having the water, it's about managing it sustainably. And that's especially important in areas where water is scarce. Things get complicated.
Yeah.
You got to understand how geography, climate, and human activity all work together.
Okay, I'm totally hooked. Let's uncover some more of these hidden gems and see what else is out there in the world of inland water.
All right, I'm ready to uncover some of these hidden gems.
Let's go to East Africa.
Okay.
There's a country there that might not be the first one you think of when you think of inland water.
Oh, really? Which one?
Ethiopia.
Ethiopia. Huh. Yeah. I know they have the Blue Nile, but I wouldn't have thought they had enough water to make the list.
And that's what makes it so interesting, right?
Yeah.
Less than 1% of Ethiopia's land is actually covered by water.
Wow, that's it.
But it still makes the top 10. So even a little bit of water can make a big difference.
Exactly. It has a big visual impact.
Yeah.
And it's super important to the country.
I've seen pictures of the Blue Nile Falls. They're amazing.
Oh, yeah.
It's like raw power and beauty all in one place.
For sure. And yet, Ethiopia has a lot of problems with water scarcity.
Really?
Yeah. The Blue Nile is a vital source of water for tons of people.
I can imagine.
But managing it well, especially in a region that's prone to drought, it's a tough job.
It's almost ironic, isn't it?
Kind of.
All that incredible water in one spot.
Right.
And then not enough water in other parts of the country. It's complicated.
Very complicated. It shows just how complex water issues can be.
Totally. It's not enough to just have the water. You have to be able to use it wisely.
You got it. You got to make sure everyone has access.
Yeah.
And you have to find a balance between what people need and keeping the environment healthy.
A delicate balance, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ethiopia shows us that even a small percentage of water can be a big deal. What's the next hidden gem on our list?
Let's head over to South America.
Ooh, South America.
Specifically, Colombia.
Mia.
They've got a good chunk of the Amazon River.
Ah, the Amazon.
Which helps them get to 8.8% water coverage.
That's impressive. And when you think about the Amazon, I mean, it's one of the most important river systems in the world, right?
Absolutely. Vital to the health of the planet.
Yeah, and it's a biodiversity hotspot, right? Tons of different species.
It's amazing. A huge network of waterways, all teeming with life. And Colombia has a big piece of it.
I've always wanted to see the Amazon rainforest. It's mind-blowing how many different kinds of plants and animals are there.
It is, and it really shows how important inland water is for biodiversity and ecosystems.
On a global scale.
Yep.
It makes you wonder, how do those ecosystems adapt to such an environment? I mean, the Amazon is constantly changing, right? Flooding, receding, shaping the land around it.
Right. It's definitely a unique environment and a challenging one, but life finds a way.
Life finds a way. It's pretty amazing how resilient nature can be.
It really is.
Speaking of unique environments, let's go to Indonesia. I've always been fascinated by Indonesia, all those islands.
Thousands of them. Each one with its own character.
Exactly. And when it comes to inland water, is there anything that stands out?
There is one place. Lake Toba in Sumatra.
Lake Toba? I think I've heard of it. What's so special about it?
Well, first of all, it's a volcanic lake.
Volcanic, so a crater filled with water.
You got it. A massive crater from a super old eruption. And right smack in the middle of this lake,
wow,
there's a big island.
Wait a second, an island in a lake?
Pretty cool, right?
That's amazing.
It's a really beautiful sight. And it's a perfect example of how inland water can shape the world around it in these unexpected ways.
Okay, I'm adding Lake Toba to my list of places to see. It's the kind of thing that sparks your imagination.
It is.
Makes you want to get out there and explore.
Exactly. And that's what makes these deep dives so fun, you know?
Yeah.
Uncovering these hidden gems, places that make you think differently about the world.
I'm with you. All right, we've gone from waterfalls in Ethiopia to the Amazon rainforest to a volcanic island in a lake. What other hidden gems are out there?
For our last stop, let's go back to Africa.
Okay.
The Democratic Republic of Congo.
Ah, the Congo. I know it's got the Congo River, which is one of the longest rivers in Africa.
Second longest.
Second longest, right. But it's not just about the river.
What else is there?
There's also Lake Tanganyika. And get this, it's so big that it's actually shared with 3 other countries.
A shared lake. That's interesting. So those waters cross national borders.
They do. Tanzania, Burundi, and Zambia.
That makes you think, you know, managing that water must be super complicated.
It is,
Yeah.
especially with so many countries depending on it. And Lake Tanganyika is not just any lake.
What is it then?
It's the longest lake in the world, over 400 miles long.
No way. The longest. That's incredible.
And it's the second deepest after Lake Baikal in Russia. So yeah, this lake is massive.
The longest lake in the world, that's got to be a vital resource. It is. Fishing, transportation, fresh water for millions of people.
It makes you think about how connected we all are when it comes to water.
Yeah.
Like what happens in one part of the world or even just one part of a lake can affect people far away.
You got it. Water doesn't care about borders. It flows freely, connects everything.
It reminds us that working together, managing water sustainably, that's super important for everyone and for the planet.
Couldn't agree more.
So we've explored this list of the top 10 countries with the most inland water.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, it's been pretty eye-opening. I came into this thinking it'd be all about these giant countries with tons of lakes and rivers.
Right.
But we've seen that's not always true.
It's definitely more complicated than that. Like, we saw how smaller countries like Ethiopia can still have a lot of inland water.
Yeah, with the Blue Nile.
Exactly. And then we saw how just one geographical feature, like the Caspian Sea for Iran, can totally change a country's ranking.
It really shows that there's more to this than just looking at a map and seeing who has the biggest blue areas. So what else should we think about when we're talking about how water-rich a country is?
That's a good question. The article we looked at focused on the area covered by inland water.
Yeah.
But what about the volume?
The volume. So like how much water is actually there.
Exactly.
Oh, I see. A country with smaller, deeper lakes could actually have way more fresh water than a country with big, shallow lakes.
Right, like comparing a deep well to like a wide puddle.
Perfect example.
They might cover the same amount of space on the surface,
Yeah.
but the amount of water they hold is completely different.
And that volume of fresh water is super important.
For
'Cause,
sure.
like, you think about drinking water, agriculture, industry.
Right, all of that.
And it even affects how well a country can deal with drought and climate change.
So it's not just about the size of the pool, it's how deep the pool is.
Exactly.
That makes things even more complicated. It does. It shows why we need to look beyond just rankings and really understand each country's water situation, how they manage their water, what challenges they face, all of that.
We've talked about how important inland water is for ecosystems,
Right.
for all the plants and animals.
Right.
But what about people? How important is it for us culturally and economically?
Oh, it's huge. Think about the communities along the Nile River in Egypt, or those who depend on the Mekong in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Those rivers are lifelines. They provide drinking water, water for crops, and they're how people get around.
It's how they make a living, too. I mean, fishing is a big part of the economy in a lot of places.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the practical stuff either. Water has deep cultural and spiritual meaning in many cultures.
That's true.
Like, think about the Ganges River in India.
Yeah, that's sacred to Hindus.
Exactly. And there are so many indigenous cultures all over the world that have strong spiritual connections to their local rivers and lakes.
Water is more than just something we need to survive. It's part of who we are, part of our traditions, part of how we see the world.
You got it. It shapes stories, art, everything.
So really understanding a country's relationship with water,
Yeah.
it goes way beyond just numbers and measurements. It's about seeing the deep connections between water, people, and the environment.
And those connections are often pretty complex.
Yeah.
They change over time. And sometimes they can even be a source of conflict, especially in places where water is scarce.
That's a good point. It reminds us that even though water is essential for life, it can also be a source of tension.
Absolutely.
It really highlights why we need to be responsible.
Yeah.
We need to manage water well, make sure everyone has access, and we need countries to work together to protect this precious resource.
Well said.
I think we did a good job diving into this topic today. We've gone from the Great Lakes to the Blue Nile Falls, from Lake Toba to Lake Baikal. We've explored this whole world of inland water, and it's been amazing. And we didn't just stop at the facts and figures. We looked at what these water bodies mean to people, to cultures, to the environment.
It's been a really interesting journey. It shows how much we still have to learn about water.
Totally. So, to our listeners, we leave you with this. Which of these watery wonders surprised you the most? And what role does inland water play in your own life, in your community, or even in your country? Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.